formerly known as e-Teacher Alumni of Malaysia. So this webinar, Talk series, is sponsored fully by the US Embassy of Kuala Lumpur. Our speaker for today's webinar is none other than Mr. Pravindharan Balakrishnan, and the title of his session is Diving into Teaching Writing. Let's get to know our speaker. So you can see here there are about 30 viewers from all over the country. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. So welcome, selamat datang. So before I proceed with the webinar, I would like to read a bit about our speaker. So prior to attaining his master's degree in Loyola University Chicago, USA in 2019, he received his BEd TESOL from University of Portsmouth, UK in 2013. As a secondary school English language teacher, he has spearheaded many youth-led projects related to education and community work, particularly in Terengganu, which has been recognized with several awards, including Vinnie Chan Award in 2016 and Best ICT Innovation back in 2017. He was one of the leading members of his school team that won a grant worth Malaysian ringgit 20,000 as the main prize of YTL Foundation School Award in 2018, enabling them to carry out their proposed 21st century learning program. His mission is to promote youth empowerment by raising the awareness of their true capabilities. So before we proceed with the webinar at talk number 4, diving into teaching writing, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, good evening. So make sure your details in the survey at the end of this session are correct, especially your emails. In the past, many participants did not get their certificate because of you didn't fill in the form correctly. So you'll get the e-certificates within a week. We'll share the link at the end of this webinar, and we'll send it through your email. So the link of the survey and certificate is only accessible for a short amount of time. So we'll share the link at the end or towards the end of this webinar, and we'll deactivate the link after a certain time. If you're watching this, make sure you fill in the form immediately after the webinar. So that's a little bit about the rules and regulations of this webinar. So I don't want to take more time. I'll give the floor to Mr. Pravindharan. So now the floor is yours and the coffee is mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sekiranya Tuan. Okay, so I'm Pravin. I'm currently an English teacher in Terengganu, SMT Padang, Midin. That's where I'm teaching. So we're going to dive into this topic immediately. Teaching writing is a thing that is a topic which I feel that many teachers can resonate with. Teaching writing is definitely one of our biggest challenges. And here today I'm going to share it's really beneficial for your own teaching practice. So we just move on to the next slide. Okay. So the first thing I would love all of you to do is just please introduce yourself in the comment section. Basically, there's the whole Southeast Asia here today. There's from Malaysia, we have from Cambodia, Algeria, which is probably I just saw a comment here. Can you now? Please let me know if you're able to hear me in the comment section.
Okay, while waiting for Mr. Pravin for a while, so I hope that the voice is a bit clear. I'm not sure, but Mr. Pravin,
What about now?
are you okay there? Yeah, we
Yeah.
can hear you. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me now? Clear? Is it clearer?
It is clearer.
Okay, all right. So I think we can just start off with introducing yourselves. So please state your name and where you're from. So we have Kasim from Pahang, Malaysia. I believe he's a teacher as well. We have Prama Intan from Jolo, Sulu, Philippines. All right. Okay. So, all right. Let's. So please introduce yourselves. It'll be great if you get to know where you're from. And also please let me know throughout the presentation if you can't hear me. That will be beneficial for me. So then I will be able to rectify if there's any problem from my side. All right. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay. All right. Okay, all right. Now, before we start, I just want us to take 2 to 3 minutes to ask ourselves, how do we teach writing? What are the strategies that we use for our students? Most of the time when we teach writing, what do? What are the first things that we do when we are going to teach writing? Like, what are the stuff that you do? Like for me, when I'm about to teach writing, the first thing that I do is I teach a little bit of vocab. I pre-teach the vocab, and that's when I teach writing. But what do you do? What do you guys do? So we have a wide range of teachers today joining us, educators right from primary school to lecturers from IPG, I believe, or universities. So there's a lot of experience that we can share here, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. So what are the stuffs that you guys do to teach writing? So I'm super excited to see most of my friends are here joining us today. So thank you guys for joining us, for joining me and this whole Ed Talk team. So we have one way to teach writing shared by Nur Putunjo, which is model essay using a template. This is one of the best ways that we can use to teach writing. It makes learners more aware, okay, this is what is needed from the question, this is what I need to write. There's another sharing from Lin Ai, who says penmanship, which is able to write, the ability to just write, introduce new vocab and give stimulus. Using Relia, using objects is a great way to teach writing as well. It brings the learners to understand their context, and then they'll be able to write something. And so, how else do we teach? There's another share by Ayman Chap. He says, predict the vocab by So this is also an excellent way. I think a couple of years ago, most Malaysian teachers were briefed about I think. I think some of us are using it in the classroom. So that is great. There's another share there by Pramzi Kanas. I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. We teach writing first by teaching the 4 macro skills and going to specific into writing. Exactly. We start off with reading, listening, speaking, and then we write. I think that's one of the best ways to actually get students to write, because they will have a lot of things in their mind, a lot of context they would have learned. I use WH questions by Vaijanti Mayandi. Again, this is an excellent way to start teaching writing, WH questions. I think I always use that as well. And there's another share there by Nur Shakila Natra. My take on teaching writing, always start with mind maps, skeleton essay, writing by chunks. I think most of the things that you guys are sharing today is what I'm going to share. But I feel my presentation will focus on why do we do this? Why do we teach in a specific way? And I hope that it will add more value to what you are doing. All right. Okay, so I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay. Oh, there's also another share there by Jaisri Mawani. Pictures also work well for descriptions. Exactly. Pictures is the thing that students can relate. Visual learners can easily relate to pictures. So what are we going to cover today? Firstly, I'm going to ask, firstly, we are going to look at why do we actually teach writing? And what is writing? What is writing all about? Is it just merely to score in exams? Is it more than that? And then I'm going to look at the challenges in writing. Then I'm going to look at, I'm going to make a connection between critical writing and Bloom taxonomy. So this is one way to intellectually engage your students through Bloom taxonomy, and writing actually works with it well. And then I'm going to look at strategies to teach writing for basic user, an independent user, and proficient user. I'm sharing these strategies based on the CEFR levels. So if you are from Malaysia, you would be very familiar with CEFR. It has been the buzzword for the past few years for English teaching. So that's what I'm going to be sharing today. All right, I think we'll move on to the next. Okay. All right, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the chat box. Thank you so much for sharing. Now I would like to know, why do we teach writing to our learners? Like, why do we actually teach writing to our learners? When I was a teacher in my first year, second year, the reason why I taught writing is just for my students to get A for the exams, pass their exams, that's the main reason why I taught writing. But later on, now I've been teaching only for 5 years. It's not long. You guys have way more, all of you have way more experience than me. But then I realized writing is much more than just scoring in exams. And I think it's essential that we teach students to become better writers, because when they become better writers, they are able to think more. They're able to think more clearly. So I would like to know, why do you teach writing? What is the reason that you do it? So just take a minute or two, just share your comments. All right, just share what you guys think. Why do you teach? I teach a secondary school, so I teach for SPM. If you're familiar, it's just a national examination, and I just do it because I want them to do great in SPM, get an A. But that's not the real case. Okay, we have a comment here by Aiman Chap. For real life communication or sharing information, exactly. Writing, it's a lifelong skill. It's a lifelong skill that you need to know. Okay, are we still okay? All right. Can you guys hear me? Is something wrong? Okay. All right. So writing's a lifelong skill. It's for real life communication and sharing information. And it's to express themselves. Thank you, Hamdi Abdul Rasul. Definitely, writing is to express yourself. It makes you understand your own reality, and that is what writing does. It allows you to communicate. Thank you, Malti Goyal. Again, if I pronounce your names wrongly, I'm so sorry. And Ferdinand Cornelio, good morning to you. All right. Okay. So, and also a former student of mine just joined. So thank you for joining us. So there's many reasons why we write. Lin I has an interesting opinion here: to put thoughts into a writing form which can be accessed for a long time. Exactly. Writing never stops. And when you write something, it's going to be there till the end of time. So writing allows you to express yourself and others to access your own understanding of your own reality. So writing is extremely important as a human. As a human right now, at this time we are in, writing is very vital for us. Enhance their soft skills in communication, creative and innovation, future mentality. Exactly. This is what we need to write. This is why we need to teach our students to write, because we are moving in an age of social media, and writing makes us to become better problem solvers, better thinkers. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so why do we teach writing? Okay, so writing helps to improve comprehension. Okay, it forces learners to think. I use the word force here. I hope it's not used negatively, but that's what writing does. It makes you to think. It enables learners to make sense of reality. I think this really connects with what Ahmad Qasim just shared. Practice thought organization skill, because when you make sense of your reality, you turn whatever chaos in your life to become order. All right. And then we have provide opportunities for reasoning. So that's what writing does, right? When you give a statement, you need to reason that out. And that's why we need to teach our learners to write, because then they'll be able to reason things out. And when they are able to reason things out, they become better decision makers. And when you become a better decision maker, you reduce the amount of conflict in your life. So writing is extremely essential today, especially in the current world that we're living. It formulates evidence for justification. With writing, you're able to justify why you're saying something. It enables critical thinking. I think we know that because we are teachers ourselves. It improves clarity of thought. So exactly what Rand's, Joachim and Hamdi just stated, exactly writing enhances all this. It enhances your other skills. You can express your viewpoints better. People will take you more seriously. And of course, it's necessary for future jobs. All right. Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide. Writing helps you in everything. It makes you a better communicator. So what is writing? So if writing is a formula, this would be the equation that I propose. Basically, it's vocabulary plus grammar, and you multiply that with observations and questioning. And with that, you create meaningful sentences. So the first thing a student needs to know is vocab and then grammar. You add these two together and you multiply that with your student's ability to, or even your own ability to observe your surrounding and question that surrounding. That's when you come out with meaningful sentences you are able to write. So it is a process, it is a productive skill, it takes time to build. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. Writing starts when you're young and all the way up till the day that you're gone. So it's a process. It builds over time. It has to be built step by step, from sentences to paragraphs, and finally to a logical piece of writing. So writing is your ability to put words and grammar together, and the way you observe and you question your own reality, you put that into words and you write something meaningful, and people are able to access this. This is what writing is essentially. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. So what types of writing do we teach our students? What kind of writing do you teach your students? Like, writing comes in so many forms. There's narratives, there's descriptions, and these days we write more emails than letters. So what types of writing do you teach your students? Just drop your comments there. Like, what kind of writing that you do? What do you teach? Like, I'm a teacher in a secondary school in Malaysia. The kind of writing that I teach my students has been focused much on narrative. Exactly, Lin, you and I, we can resonate together because we teach a lot of narratives in school. I'm not sure where you're from, Lin, I'm sorry. But I think in Malaysian secondary schools, we tend to stress on narrative. And Santri, there's all types of writing. There's a range of formats. I think in schools, technically, we focus so much on narrative. Especially for weaker learners, they focus so much on narrative that sometimes this is the mistake which I make. I tend to miss out on argumentative essays. And then there's this great comment by Akmal Hamza, who was who's my friend from university days, who is still my friend right now. So he writes Facebook comments. Exactly. We are teaching our students, and one of the things they need to write is Facebook comments. And most of the time when they write in English in Facebook comments, the mistake that my students make, technically they make grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes, and this is not good. People tend to lose. Try trust with you when you write things with error. So it's essential that you do not make these mistakes. All right. So daily journal that enhances their vocab and sentence construction. Ferdinand here just shared one of a great strategy to actually teach, to improve students' writing, which is to use daily journal. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, narrative, argumentative, reflective, factual. Thank you, Aiman Chap. That's a great share there. That's what we focus on in secondary schools in Malaysia. There's another share there from Chia Ying, teach argumentative essay and report writing. Exactly, we do a lot of that in Malaysia. IG story, exactly. Students these days use IG, Instagram. They would need these right skills to write in Instagram. So these are the types of writing. There is narrative, predictive, descriptive essays, factual essays, argumentative essays, letters, or today we write emails, articles, basically factual essays, and persuasive essays. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. All right. So persuasive essays are what usually is lacking these days in schools. We need to teach students to be more persuasive in the writing. Okay, what are the challenges that students face when writing? So I would like to know, what challenges do your students face when writing? The kind of challenges that my students face is they are just not interested to write anymore. They feel like there is no reason for them to write. So what are the challenges that your students face? I would love to know that. It can be, the challenges comes from, there are all types of challenges that students face. They are just not ready to write. Hamdi just said poor vocabulary. Exactly. Students these days, or even those days, vocab is one of the biggest problem in writing. They just do not have the right vocabulary. And poor grammar. Grammar is also a big problem. So today I hope that what I'm going to share would be good to just get them to write, to have some kind of structure when they write. I think lack of vocabulary is the biggest thing. Thank you, Vaijanti Mayandi. A lack of vocabulary, that is definitely one of our biggest challenge for students. They do not have the set of vocabulary to write. So we're going to look at that as well. Lackadaisical attitude. Thank you, Mohana Ram. Mohana Ram is a popular teacher in Malaysia. I think he recently won a global award from, and most of us in the English teaching fraternity knows him. And exactly that is right. Lackadaisical attitude. They take writing easily, like it's not an important skill. It's only later on they realize how important writing is. Thank you, Ahmad Kasim. Choice of words, idea development. So this is where we need to find strategies to get them to write, develop their ideas. Lack of motivation. That's also another thing. Students do not have the motivation to write anymore. They feel like this is pointless. So it is extremely essential that we remind them, like, why do you need to write? And I think that's why the first thing that we talked about in this presentation today is like, why do we teach writing? Because it improves comprehension. It makes you a better thinker. And this is what we need to remind our students. The more you write, the more you're able to access the realities surrounding you. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So we have negative impression towards English language itself, which diminish the motivation to writing. Thank you, Lin Ai. So students come in with the mindset they're not interested to write. They do not like the language, and they're just not going to do anything else. So we need to shift this through some really simple strategies that I hope that I'll be able to share in a bit. Learner challenges. So these are the challenges which I listed. Of course, there's more than that. Writing anxiety. They just feel anxious to write. Lack of vocabulary, just like what you guys mentioned. Poor spelling, poor grammar. This is tied in. So it's necessary to also improve their spelling, but I would say spelling is not an essential thing that can be remedied later on. I think what needs to be remedied first is poor grammar and lack of vocab. students' readiness. They come to the class, they're not ready to write, they have a negative impression, they do direct translation, they're just not ready to do it. And I think it's extremely necessary to get them ready by building a classroom which is safe for them to write and make mistakes, and that is how we get them to start to write. Lack of exposure to reading materials. So these days, students have become very visual. The things that they read are from Facebook and Instagram. So one of the things that we can do as teachers is to expose them to different types of reading materials, and that will be great for them to actually start off to understand. This is how writing is. This is how you write, and so on. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So there's a lot of interesting shares here. Alex Morpheus, a friend of mine, just said direct translation. So if you have students who have a different L1, they tend to tend to translate directly from their mother tongue. That is also a problem, but it's totally fine. I mean, at least you're still writing. And okay, so now, what are the challenges teachers face when teaching writing? So what are the challenges you guys face? Or you guys, I mean, everyone here face. As a teacher, what do you face? We'll just move on to the next slide because it's very related. Teaching learners challenge and teachers challenge is very related. So we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so teachers challenges. You're motivating your students. That is a challenge. Different levels in a classroom. So differentiated learning is a must these days. Time constraint. Teaching writing takes time. You can't go to a 30 minutes classroom and teach writing. Students are bored, and I mean, I totally get that. I have students who are really not interested in my classroom, and they're just bored. They're really not interested to what I'm going to offer. Providing good feedback. This is also a problem because students, teachers, even for me, during my first year of teaching, I was very ambitious in giving feedback. I tend to mark their essays and I would highlight all their mistakes. And I think that is a problem for them. That's when they lose motivation. I think what you can do, or what I did better, was when they write a piece of writing, I only find one mistake in their writing. I only focus on that one mistake. Say if they make a tense error, I just look at all their sentences and find for only tense errors or verb errors. And when I do that, students feel their writing is improving because there's only one mistake there. I mean, one form of mistake. So that's a different way of providing better feedback for them. Like, do not go all out in giving your feedback because for weak learners, it can demotivate them. It's best to just focus on one thing and then just tell them, okay, this is where your mistakes are. In each sentences, you're using present tense instead of past tense. And this is a narrative essay. A narrative essay is something which has already completed, already done. So maybe you should change your tenses. So this would make them more cognizant of their mistakes and difficult materials. Okay, there's an interesting share there by Yazid Fauzi, who's also a friend of mine, who says integrating 21st century learning, that's one of the teachers' challenge. And I think that is true, especially right now where there's social distancing. I don't think it's easy to integrate 21st century learning as what we tried to do before the whole pandemic, where we had students doing group projects or presenting in a group. With social distancing, that is impossible. So I think we definitely need to rethink ways of how we can do it better. And that is something for all of us to think collectively. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. Okay, so before we dive in further, let's look writing and Bloom taxonomy. So how is this related? Okay, we'll go on to the next one, to the next slide. All right. Okay, so basically the Bloom taxonomy is a great way to intellectually just engage your students. Like when you design a task, using this, using Bloom taxonomy will help you better set the task for your students actually. So how does it work? Let's look at the six scales. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So what it does is, with Bloom taxonomy, it helps to build your students' proficiency, your students' writing proficiency. It intellectually engages them, and you can move the difficulty from a personal narrative right up to a persuasive writing, allowing them to grow as writers from writing narratives up until writing creative writing, even persuasive writing. Okay, I'll try to show an example of this. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, all right. An example of writing through Bloom taxonomy. So how does it work? So at the lowest scale is remembering. All right, so this is an image of a car. How a student would engage with a question, or when you are designing a question for your students, is to ask a question in the remembering scale: how a car looks, how does it feel? So a student should be able to write a short paragraph or even a couple of sentences of how a car looks or how it feels. This depends on your learner's skill or on your learner's ability to write. And moving on, the next scale, they're able to understand how a car works, the different parts of a car, the engine and so on. They're able to understand all of this, and then why people need cars today. So that is also important. They should be able to understand why cars are necessary today. And then moving on, applying, can easily know the functions of a car. There's a typo in the presentation, all right? So they're able to apply their knowledge and use that in their writing. And then when they start to analyze, they're able to analyze different car types and compare and contrast efficiency of different cars. And when they're able to evaluate, they can evaluate the positive and negative effects of different types of cars or even vehicles for that matter. So when they move up the ranks, this Bloom taxonomy, it intellectually engages them. And you're also able to build your task, or you're able to set the task according to the learner's intellectual level. All right. And finally, creating. They are able to propose solutions or alternatives to cars or even design their own vehicles. So by using this, by using Bloom taxonomy, it allows learners to be intellectually engaged throughout the skills. And it's much easier for you, as you'll be able to guide them as an educator, guide them towards becoming a better writer. From being able to write narratives right up until being able to write their own craft, their own things, their own craft. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. I just want to point out an interesting share there by Iqbal Kaur. Good morning, WhatsApp language is coming into students' writing. Exactly, WhatsApp is what we use to communicate a lot in Malaysia. And students tend to use the short forms into their own writing. I mean, there's one way to look at it, that they're able to write, but it's definitely not the best way to write. And WhatsApp language, it can be very detrimental for students' own thinking because it's very simplified. Okay, we'll move on now to semantic mapping. So this is one strategy to teach basic users or even advanced or even proficient users how to teach vocabulary. So it allows students to extremely good if you want to teach your learners vocabulary for a specific topic, and they will able to grasp the concepts immediately. Even if it's not immediately, it improves their retention rate. They'll be able to connect the ideas in their own lives. So this is the first strategy for teaching vocabulary using semantic mapping. I believe some of us are doing this in the classroom. I think this is one of the best ways to get them to teach the right vocab. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Right. Okay, strategy 2 for basic users. Now, we covered vocab earlier, which is semantic mapping. So this is the way to teach. It's called running table, and we all do this. I'm pretty sure we all do this. It's extremely important for ESL and EFL learners. So you divide it with the subject, verb, and agreement, or object. So what is the subject? What is the subject? A subject is a noun, is a person, place, thing, or idea. So I've listed to here the boy and I. What is the verb? Kicks, feel. What is a noun or adjective? And a description of it. What does it look like? What does it taste? What does it smell? How does it smell? What does it feel like? So, and then students just write the sentence. The boy kicks the ball. I feel sad. This is a very mechanical process, and it's for extremely basic users. But if you have a student who is like 15 years old, 16 years old, and unable to still write, and he does not get the basics, this would be one of the best ways to reintroduce to them. I'm pretty sure they have done this in their primary school, but over the years, they just, you just get, there's so many things to learn, you get mixed up. So this is definitely one of the best ways to actually introduce and reinforce grammar structure to your students. SVA, SVO, it doesn't really matter. It helps learners to distinguish subject, verb, and order. Learners become more cognizant of the structure, and when you master this pattern, and for students, it's beneficial for them in the long term. All right. So we have semantic mapping, we have running table. Both of these just covers their basics. All right. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay. All right. So strategies as we move. I think we need to go to before. Okay, activities for basic users. All right. Okay, sorry, next slide, please. Okay. All right, so activities for basic users. So I've come up with 3 activities. This is again something which you can do in your own classroom. Writing about self. So what I mentioned earlier, if writing was an equation, one part of the formula would be questioning. All right. So all about me, questioning yourself. So all about me, what is your name? How old are you? Who are your friends? What is your favorite color? What do you like to wear? How do you come to school? Name 1 thing you can't do. Name 3 things you can do. What or who do you love? These are all really basic questions which students are very familiar with, and they are able to write these questions. They have the knowledge and the content to write about this because it's about themselves. So writing about self is one of the first few things you can do in the classroom. If you go into a classroom, get your students to just write about themselves, it reveals them more and you will know them more. At the same time, it's a good practice for them to just start writing and understand, believe in themselves that they can write. Because most of the time, a student loses confidence because he or she feels, I can't write long anymore. I only can write 1 or 2 sentences. I just can't write. I'm stupid. And I think this challenges that. When they see 5 to 6 lines of information written about themselves, they get the confidence that, oh, I can write. I'm not stupid after all. I can write actually. So this is why we need to have this kind of activities, because it challenges them and it just makes them become better writers, and they will have the confidence to keep writing. All right, next strategy, providing sentence starters or word banks. So as a teacher, when you're teaching a topic, it's extremely important you give them the right, you give them sentence starters or even word banks for them to use. So this actually helps them to start off the essay. And sometimes this is what a learner needs. They just need something to start off. When I see my students writing essays, most of them, they love to start like this during this era of globalization, and then they just start off. So something like that is good for them to just start writing their own pieces. So in here I've listed some. It's opinion. I just got it from Google. When you're teaching something, you can create your own starters, or you can just share something which is already made, which saves you time, and they're able to use this, and their writing looks much better. They tend to have better ownership of what they use. All right, describing objects. Again, you might need to pre-teach some vocab when you're describing an object. But you can ask them to question. Again, you need to get your students to question themselves. Like, how big is this cup? How do I feel today? What does the sound of glass make? Really, anything at all. How does it smell like? What do I use the cup for? When they question themselves, they're able to describe things. And when they're able to describe things, they're able to write more. When they're able to write more, they're thinking more. So again, it all comes down to this. Writing is an essential skill. All right? Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. All right, okay. Strategies as we move from sentence writing. Okay, now as we move from sentence writing, students will start writing. As we move from sentence writing, we will start writing paragraphs. So it's important to let them know what a paragraph consists. So you can do this either explicitly or implicitly. All right, so there is a comment there from Dila Kamal, who's a popular English teacher in Malaysia. She has her own Facebook page. She teaches young learners. So she states, "Hi Pravin, your ed talk makes me wish I'm teaching older learners." I think I would agree to that, because where I teach from, I'm teaching like secondary school students from 13 to 17 years old. So some of these ideas might not work for really young learners who are just like embarking into their journey of writing. But I hope one or two shares in this webinar will be able to be helpful. Will be helpful for even young learners, but let's just go through this and see what we get. Okay, so when we move from sentence writing to paragraph writing, it's necessary for learners to know how a paragraph looks like. So it has a topic sentence, 3 or 4 supporting sentences, and a concluding sentence. And the same thing for the story: a main idea, and a couple of supporting ideas, and a concluding idea. And this brings your paragraph together. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So how do you introduce paragraph structure? So this is the first strategy, and I think this can work for young learners. I'm not really sure. I don't really know the context. So for example, like this, dear Bobin, I'm in Uttar Pradesh. So this is a postcard. Obviously, you're traveling. I'm in Uttar Pradesh. So that is your main idea, right? And then you go, we are having a lot of fun. Today we visited a temple. Tomorrow we'll visit a museum. These are the supporting details, the stuff that they are doing in Uttar Pradesh, the activities that they're doing there. And you're having a lot of fun doing it. And what is the concluding idea? I will tell you all about it when I come back. You conclude your postcard, all right? Lots of love and take care. And that's the greeting, the end greeting, right? All right. So this is a good, easy, simple way to introduce structure, to introduce paragraph structure to your students. All right. And the next slide, we will look at a hamburger, and we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, this is the hamburger paragraph. I'm sure this is one of the ways that we all introduce paragraph to students. And to be honest, this is not something new. It is not something novel. It has been used for many years since I was a kid, and now I'm 30 now, so it has been there for as long as I can remember. But it's extremely a good way to introduce students to your topic sentence and your concluding sentence, and then you have your supporting sentences in between. So your supporting sentences are like the meat. It is everything in your essay. But you need the topic and but you need both the buns, which is the topic, and the concluding sentence, which brings your essay together, brings your paragraph together. So that is why you need these supporting sentences. And the meat comes with the tomato, with the lettuce, with the mayo, to the burger. And this is why the supporting details, the supporting sentences are extremely important. And I love this because it's a good way to teach students, and they all love hamburgers, like what Khairul Anwar just said. So this is what it is. It's one of the best ways to just like show to your students, okay, this is what, okay, this makes sense. And they draw a visual map in their head, and then they can start writing. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So you can, okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, ordering paragraphs. So the first strategy, now your learners are able to write, they're able to write a couple of sentences. So what do you do next? Strategy 1 for independent users, sorting strips or basically ordering paragraphs. So you give them a bunch of sentences. You ask them to order a sentence. The learners come up with 3 to 4 supporting details. And then after producing the list, students write a whole paragraph using sentence connectors. So once again, this is a good way for them to get thinking, and it's a good way for them to actually understand how a paragraph works. It has a main idea, a couple of supporting details, and then boom, your concluding sentence or your sentence to justify, if you want to justify anything, and then you end the paragraph. Okay, we'll do a small activity here. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so give a topic sentence for this. So what we're doing today, right? The topic sentence is not given, and I've written down 3 supporting details. The first strategy to teach writing is to teach vocabulary through semantic mapping. The second method is for students to master the pattern of English writing. 3, the third way to teach writing is to introduce paragraph writing. And the concluding sentence, the methods that can be used to teach writing. These methods can be used to teach writing effectively and efficiently. So there's an error in the concluding sentence, right? But so what is the topic sentence that you propose? So I would like to know, drop your comments on what is the topic sentence do you think works best for. What you can do is basically, what is the topic sentence? You say if it's an accident, your topic sentence would be where the accident took place, and then your supporting details would be that, like the accident took place near my school, and then you give out some supporting details of the area and what happened in that area. So this can also be used for narrative writing, but it's best used for factual essays and also argumentative essays or report writing. Okay, all right. Okay, strategies in systematic writing. Thank you, Ferdinand. This would also work for these supporting details. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. All right. All right. Okay, topic sentence. Write 3 supporting details for this topic sentence. So the topic sentence that is given is social media does more harm than good. Now so just help me out here. Just give me some supporting details, like supporting the argument that social media does more harm than good. So just drop your supporting details, like why do you think social media does more harm than good? There's an influx. There's an influx of fake news, right? There's a growing amount of fake news on social media that is unregulated. So of course, for some students, using the words such as unregulated would not be part of their vocab, but what would you write? So for this kind of topics, it's good to provide an argumentative topic, because then they would write a lot of interesting things. One topic that I usually use for my students is K-pop has a bad influence, or K-pop music is not good, and my students get crazy, they are unhappy, and and they will start rebutting that argument, right? I like this this comment by Malti Goyal. It spoils the language of students. So yes, it is true. Social media definitely plays a role. It tends to oversimplify students' understanding of things, and it spoils their understanding of things. It does disturb with how students learn. Aiman Chap, cyberbully. There's a share there from Hazila Hassan, who's a colleague of mine. She says students are exposed to negative things, which is true. With social media, there's no regulation. There's a lot of negative things that can be on social media. And Stella says scammers are everywhere. The users are advised to share their personal information on social media wisely. Exactly. So social media does more harm than good because scammers are everywhere. And you need to be wise in sharing your information. Boom, you have 2 sentences over there. And this will help you. This can help the students to develop their own argument. And there's social media do not have a censor board. That is true. Social media does not have a censor board, but it's also good that social media does not have a censor board because it gives us a platform for free speech. But it also can be argued, like what kind of free speech do you want to be out there, right? So these are things that will get students to think and reason out. It's extremely important. And Ayman Chab has the distraction. That is true. With online learning, students are always on their social media, and it's not great. Social media is free media to share your views. Exactly. It's a great place to share your views, but what views can be said to, what views are considered to be negative, and where do we cross the line? If we are sharing xenophobic views, is it okay? If we are sharing racist views, what can we do? I think this is where supporting details helps to build a student's argument. It helps students to reason out things, and it's extremely essential for that. Ilidina says exposure of students' lives to strangers. Exactly, you're putting yourself in harm by sharing unnecessary things. And then not all information got from social media are true. That is extremely right, Saraswati Ramakrishnan. All right. Okay. Addiction to social media addiction. That is true. Nur Atira, people spread fake news which can cause negative consequences to others. That's definitely one of the negative sides of social media. It just gives us a platform, but it can spread fake news, and most of the time, when students become better writers, to be honest, they become great at spotting fake news. They become more cognizant of what is shared on social media because they know what is right and what is wrong. They're able to understand and reason out and provide evidence for that. So that is why we teach writing. That is why we need to teach writing. And that is why we need to remind our students why they need to write. So if they're feeling bored, they're feeling writing is a waste of time, it's important to remind them, like, the more you learn, the more you write, the better decisions you make. And when you make the better decisions, you also make better political decisions, which results in better lives. All right. Shafirul says students are exposed with unknown people that might be criminal. Exactly. Social media does not have a vetting system. You might get pedophiles on social media, and I think recently on TikTok, people have been saying that TikTok is a breeding ground for pedophiles. And again, you have that kind of understanding. You put that in your writing, it makes your writing more accessible and better reasoned out. Prominent cyberbullying, fake news spread faster than good news. Exactly. It's like an addiction of negation. I like that phrase a lot, Rajkumar. It's like addiction of negation. It rhymes as well. So if you put that kind of stuff in your writing with all the rhyming things going on, it's going to impress people, and people are going to love that. People are going to love that. Nelisam, thank you for your comment. People find it hard to distinguish the virtual world from reality. Exactly. We tend to live a different life in the virtual world than in reality. The proliferation of fake news is all over the internet. Problems in cyber security tends to rise. These are all great points, great supporting details that we can use for our students. And let's look at another comment from Alvarado. You could see something inappropriate. It could ruin your balanced lifestyle, especially if more time allotted to it due to addiction. And 3, young learners will copy everything they see, even if it already go beyond the norm. Exactly. These are great supporting details that students can build, and they can start reasoning out things. So by providing supporting details, you get to reason things out. And thank you, Khairul Anwar. Students are lack of social skills in real life. Exactly. Social media takes away the ability to interact, in real world. And exactly. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. Okay. So when you have taught them the ability to build your topic sentence, the ability to write the supporting details, boom, it's time to teach them connectors in English. I just got it off the net. You can also get it off the net. You can create your own and just emphasize on what you want to teach. You don't teach everything. Students can get overwhelmed. Just teach what you got to teach. And this is great. When they are able to connect the sentences, they connect the ideas. When they connect the ideas, their essay becomes cohesive. When it becomes cohesive, it's simple to read, it's easily understood, it's easy to understand, and that is what you want. They become better communicators. All right. Okay. There's an interesting comment from Chia Swanyo. Students waste precious time in reading social media. They should redeem the time reading good books. Exactly. These days we got students who are really not interested in books anymore, much interested in social media. Or there's this website called Wattpad, WATTPAD.com, where people write stories and they read it on there. And what happens is students, when they read materials like this, I mean, it's good, they still learn something out of it, but they do not become better writers, essentially. Because writing then becomes very sensationalized. Writing is not something should be sensationalized. Writing is something which gives you evidence to write something and to really communicate your idea in a with well-founded evidence. And Stella Ho, she says, when teaching writing, I demand them to use connectors. Exactly, you should demand them because it's essential. Phrasal verbs and idioms are a must in writing as well. Thank you for pointing that out, Stella. I did not mention throughout my presentation. Thank you so much. Exactly, that's what we need. We need phrasal verbs and idioms. All right. If you wish to write, read. That is true, Benny Ching Lohera, I think. Thank you so much. If you wish to write, you need to read. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, connectors are extremely important. Okay, now if you're dealing with a proficient user, someone who can write sentences, and then someone who's able to write paragraphs, someone who can write, you have a student who is really doing well there. What do? It's time you use mentor text. Basically using sample essays. Someone pointed out early on the presentation, using sample essays. So this is what you can do. Mentor texts are essential because students get to really see what the question wants and what they need to write. Hamdi just shared collocations. Exactly, collocations is necessary to make your essay look to give your essay more flavor to it. So if you look at the burger, collocations, phrasal verbs and idioms would be the meat and the lettuce and the vegetables. Okay, so modeling alone is not enough because modeling tends to give off a very structured view. Is when your students are able to go to the next level, it's time for you to use mentor text. Basically sample essays of good students. Use them as sample essays for your intermediate students, and then your intermediate students get to understand the nuances of the language and then they become better writers. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. So modeling alone is not enough. One of the other strategies is definitely to get them to look at mentor text. And what are the other strategies? Let's look at them. Let's look at the next slide for what are other strategies in teaching writing. Okay, the first one, WH word expansion. We all use it. WH words can be used to expand students' writing, prompt students to build on new ideas, stimulate students to write a paragraph through questioning, improve students' narrative writing. So it's essential to teach your students. It is very essential to teach your students to question everything they see in their surrounding. Because the more you question, the more you can write. Who, where, when, why, what, how, which, how many, how often. These are all just questions that they can ask and they can develop their writing. For example, who, ask about a person, active subject of the sentence. Who did this? Who is the woman? Who are you calling? Who broke the vase? Who typed on the laptop? These are things which you can use. Where, asking in or what place or position. Where do you live? Where are my boots? Okay, who is that woman? Where does she live? That woman is my mother. She lives in the village. Boom, you have two sentences there. And WH word expansion works very well if you're writing a narrative. Alright, so there's also when, and then why, asking for a reason or explanation. What, asking for a specific thing or object. How, asking for a way, manner or form. Which, how many, how often. Okay, these are all necessary if you want to write, if you want your students to keep writing. WH word allows them to expand their essays. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. And the next strategy would be, I believe the next, yes, WH training is good for weak students. If you're dealing with higher level learners, WH word expansion can actually really bore them. They will not like the structured form of it. So it is something that you might want to avoid depending on your students. If you're dealing with weak or intermediate learners, WH words are great. But the next strategy that I'm sharing is journal writing. So I just got it out from the net, from the internet. Get your students to practice daily. So journal writing allows them to write daily. Students become more confident. Students familiarize themselves with writing, and it gives some kind of consistency in their writing. So if you look here, I've done this structure. Now this structure, you can use this for weak learners. I think this would work for very young learners as well. Like what Dila Kamal earlier said, because she works with young learners. I think this would be able to work for them. You just might need to pre-teach some of the vocabulary. Let's look at it. On blank, so maybe on the day, I saw, what did you see? So on Monday, I saw a tiger. I mean, you're not going to see a tiger in real life. Or on Monday, I saw the phone or anything, really. All right. For breakfast, I ate. The weather was cloudy. I wore a shirt. I went to the market. I bought. What did you buy? For lunch, I ate. I studied. I read. At home, I played. For dinner, I ate. I would like to have eaten. Okay, so for dinner, I ate bread. I would like to have eaten spaghetti. I drank, I watched, I had a bad day. I had a great day. I went to sleep at 9 p.m. What you didn't do that day? I didn't exercise. I didn't do my homework. I didn't play with my cat. I didn't talk to my mother. Tomorrow I will get up at, tomorrow I will go, tomorrow I will see, tomorrow I will play. So this structure can work with young learners, I believe. You might need to teach vocabulary, but it gets them to think of the day. And journal writing makes you keep track of your day. There's a lot of comments coming in. And there's this great comment from Honey Grace, who says journals are used not just only to practice but also to monitor their progress and more in expressing themselves. Exactly. So I only saw journals as a way to as a practice, but actually it's more than that. And thank you to Honey Grace for pointing that out. You can use it to monitor their progress and they become more expressive over time. And also there's a comment from Nureen, who says WH words do help for my students who are weak and average. True. From Nureen, sorry. And Annalyn says, if you are aiming for critical thinking, use inferential questions like how and why. Exactly. And also Heidi commented that we use journal writing in school with a template to follow to guide the students. So it is good if you have a template. I mean, it helps with the structure. And if you're dealing with higher level learners, when they're able to write their own, I think it's good to do away with the template. Because when students become very structured, they tend to think in a certain way. And that is why when they have reached the next level of writing, it is good to do away with with any kind of structure. But this is only when the learner is at a higher level. Where you're looking at proficient learners who are able to write, who are already getting who are getting a low B or a high B or an A. You're looking at good learners, like advanced learners. If you're looking at average learners, which what most of us are dealing with, or even very weak learners,